And with that, I will pass the presenter off to Tom. Tom, go ahead.
All right, I'm waiting to see the presentation handoff box. There it is, okay. Okay, with just a check, do you see just my presentation slide?
Yep.
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Bahoon, and I'm the Deputy Director of Maine Rural Water Association. Maine Rural Water Association is one of 49 state rural water associations whose parent company is National Rural Water Association in Duncan, Oklahoma. Last year, State Rural Water Association staff delivered over 75,000 on-site technical assistance visits and over 150,000 hours of training to more than 37,000 utilities. Rural water training and technical assistance covers many aspects of operating and managing, as well as financing water and wastewater utilities. For what I do for the Maine Rural Water Association is I perform training and technical assistance for rural water systems in Maine, as well as a new role. I'm pretty proud of my promotion, but I now have managerial and leadership responsibilities for our circuit riders, our field staff, and also our technical assistance providers. I am very honored to be here, being asked by William Platten to do this presentation for the webinar. I'd like to thank Bill. Also, I'd like to thank Darcy and Sarah. They were very patient with Gary, Stacy, and myself with getting set up and getting familiar with using the webinar. So thanks so much, Stacy, Gary, and Bill. I'm sorry, Darcy, Sarah, and Bill. My presentation is essentially an update from a presentation I did at the 15th annual EPA Drinking Water Workshop in Covington, Kentucky. What a great workshop. I was very pleased to be invited to do the presentation, and I found it to be extremely beneficial for technical assistance that I provide and for what rural water provides. I recommended this annual gathering for this workshop to all my rural water colleagues. It's my understanding that the next one is going to be in the Cincinnati area, and these are tentative dates, and I'm hoping to attend. So in Maine, I'm going to describe some of the exercises we've done. Again, this is an update, so some of these we've done that I've discussed at the last conference, but we've done 5 more since. But in all, since 2014, Maine Rural Water has conducted 20 exercises, and they involved workshops, orientations, tabletops, drills, and full-scale exercise involving water utilities, the communities they serve, and the various agencies that would be involved with an emergency, and many others, and I'll detail that further on. So the other folks that were involved are specifically in our exercises, and more to come. We're going to be doing 5 more this year. The Maine Drinking Water Program, which has primacy over the water utilities, as well as the Maine Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the Maine Department of Environmental Protection, which has primacy over wastewater, Maine Emergency Management Agency, and the counties that fall under them, which we worked with 10 other 16 counties in Maine. We worked with many local fire, police, and public works departments, the Maine State Police, and as well as the county sheriff's departments. All have jurisdiction responsibilities that vary from county to county and area to area. Some other agencies, U.S. Coast Guard, as well as Maine's 2 big power companies being CMP and Emera, a number of chemical delivery companies either being on rail or by truck. Critical customers including hospitals, schools, universities, housing authorities, and certainly many other businesses. The main and certainly main water and wastewater utilities involved with the exercises, and every exercise involves the WARN, the main water and wastewater agency response network. All of our exercises utilize the Homeland Security Exercise and Evaluation Program, also known as HCEP. HCEP offers a common approach to managing the processes of these various things, like designing and developing the exercises, conducting the exercises, evaluating the exercises, and certainly the improvement planning process. The most important part that you don't ever want to leave out is identify the gaps, identify your strengths, and improve upon them. So our exercises involved these steps, a number of meetings, but very active meetings with a clear agenda and objectives. But our first meeting is a concept and objective meetings, which is the purpose of the exercise, the objectives, and you select the exercise location, the date, and the duration. The initial planning meeting, sometimes combined with the concept and objective meetings, but you define the exercise objectives further, determine evaluation requirements, you identify relevant plans, policies, and procedures that you want to test, you discuss potential exercise scenarios, and then you select an exercise design team. Your team needs to be a mix of different people throughout, the people that you want the exercise to involve, as well as subject matter experts, depending on the scenario you select. So the design team, they actually select the scenario and determine the desired critical tasks that you want the players to perform. And then you develop SMART objectives associated with the critical tasks. And then you detail the evaluation process and select a team to do the evaluation. Other meetings that may be involved, depending on the complexity of the exercise, would be a midterm planning and a final planning meeting, depending on, again, the type and complexity of the exercise. I believe Gary's going to go into the details of planning, so I don't want to step on his presentation. The types of exercises we conducted, well, there's two types we did. Two general types is discussion-based and also action-oriented, whereas discussion-based, we're in a confined environment. And they include workshops, orientations, and tabletop exercises. The action-oriented exercises that we've conducted included drills and full-scale exercises. Much more complex and logistics are more involved. The design team, as I indicated, they actually are the ones that determine the SMART objectives. Very important that they're SMART. They're specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Very important that they're realistic, that people will embrace them. Hey, it's very likely to happen, and everything around that scenario that led up to that emergency needs to be realistic, and you need to put a lot of energy into that. So here are some exercises we did for different utilities. And the first one that I'm going to go over was in a rural town in Maine, and here is a water tower, and this is the normal look of this water tower, and then we crashed a plane into it. And this was realistic because this tower is at the end of a runway, and the planes that take off there can have a hard time. There's a lot of wind in this area, and so very realistic scenario. The superintendent of the utility was quite concerned and wanted to know what the impact would be. So this was one of them. These exercises that we've done, the first people are on scene are typically the emergency responders, and they're to evaluate the emergency and make the initial notifications. And obviously their initial response will be on life and safety, and they have to incorporate that with notifying the appropriate people, like the water utility, and we measure that and discuss that in detail. it's very important they understand that, hey, that thing that was sticking out of the ground there that is now leaking water is associated with the water system. So many of them know that, but it's good to reiterate the importance of a storage tank to a water utility and what would be the impact. Here's another one, a normal view in a very busy intersection in a college town in Maine. And there's a large water main there that is aged. And so we broke the water main and caused a car accident with power lines down and people gathered around and the police were on scene. Obviously their first priority is life and safety. Along with that, that utility was prompted to open an interconnect because they were losing water. The very next day, there was a chemical spill of sodium hydroxide in the wellhead protection area, and thereby putting more stress on the utility. So there are, a lot of details around this. The objectives were very clear. There were smart objectives associated with this scenario and looking for specific response. Another exercise we did near a surface water source where we had a car fire, and this is part of our national park system, very popular hiking trail. We had 3 cars that caught fire, and the emergency responders came to the scene and found that 30 hikers and sightseers were trapped in the lower parking lot, and some of them with injuries, and the fire spread to the woods. So very, very likely in this area. So obviously the first responders are distracted with many priorities, and one of them was to notify the water utility. And here is, see right where the, it says Long Pond Trailhead, the intake is near there, and we had a car fire. So what's the problem? Well, they use AFFF foam for fighting car fires. And if they did use the AAA foam that they had in their fire barn that contained PFAs. And it just highlighted the impact that it would have on a surface water system, and then prompted the surface water system to take action that, hey, they fought the fire and the runoff went into the surface water supply. We had a train derailment that we did with the utility. The train actually derailed at a trestle and leaked an unknown substance. This happened in the middle of the night. The surface water supply is in that same water body, and they needed to, as the emergency progressed, the utility needed to find out what actually leaked and how much. And we tested that response and that situational awareness in the wee hours of the morning. Home heating oil, there are incidents all the time in Maine of home heating oil, either in a resident's home or in a traffic accident. And here we simulated a spill, and the emergency responders showed up, and they need to be aware that, hey, where the spill is within a wellhead protection area. So we heightened the awareness, and then this did prompt the water utility to have to elect to shut down the water system so that they did not draw in the spill into their aquifer. We did a full-scale, a number of exercises leading up to a full-scale exercise. This as part of the Salmon Falls Watershed Collaborative. This was a collaborative between the states of Maine and New Hampshire and the various agencies that utilize the Salmon Falls River. And what it involved was, this is just part of, protecting the watershed. We did an emergency response initiative involving 12 emergency planning exercises. We did 2 tabletop exercises, a boom deployment drill in the event there was a leak, a spill, and then a full-scale exercise. On the Salmon Falls River were the intakes of a water system supplying a town in Maine, and also across the border, the same water source, just a spread of maybe a couple hundred feet, was an intake that provided water to the town of a town in New Hampshire. And the Salmon Falls River, chemical spill, we did a boom deployment drill, teaching the fire departments, both a Maine fire department, Berwick Fire Department, and also Rochester, New Hampshire Fire Department, to collaborate together and to deploy 2 booms, both protecting the intakes of the 2 water systems. Again, the exercise involved 2 tabletop exercises over a number of years. 2014, we did a tabletop exercise in South Berwick, and then in 2018, we did another tabletop exercise in Somersworth, New Hampshire, leading up to a full-scale exercise involving both towns and both jurisdictions, state agencies, as well as the water utilities. Another scenario where we had another home heating oil truck roll over. They need to identify the contents and then report that potentially the leak could get into the public water source. And then most recently, we did a tanker truck rollover. 1203 is gasoline and highly volatile. This required the fire department to shut down the grid. When they shut the power down, it shut down the power to the small pump stations for this small rural system, which did not have emergency generators. So there was a benefit to that, because actually the spill happened within the wellhead protection area and they had no choice. They had to shut down their water system, but there was an impact to the customers they served. And this just showing the spread, and to the right on this slide is the wellhead protection area for the 2 wells in that area, or 2 pumping stations. In all our scenarios, we involve having to deal with the media. The first one is social media, and this one here, social media posts indicate that the water has been contaminated and recommends people seek medical attention. This causes panic, as well as a lot of folks end up going to the hospital for no reason at all. Essentially, in our scenarios, the water wasn't contaminated, but it was interpreted that it was, and then it went rampant. So how does the utilities and how does public safety and the community deal with providing updated, accurate information? So along with social media, we also inject information that the on scene are the local press, and they have questions and they want an update for their next live broadcast. With our exercises, it's very important that the facilitator of the exercise maintain control. He or she is in charge. He needs to, and she needs to direct towards a desired outcome. As preposterous as this is, we tell people, and again, our exercises are realistic. They're not unrealistic like this, but we tell them, if you don't believe it, it really can happen. So it's important to say, don't fight the scenario, go with it. There's a reason why we caused this incident. The other aspect of doing exercises is that you are going to reveal vulnerabilities. There's no way of exercising an emergency response plan without doing this. So you need to have an agreement with everyone, is that they keep it within their professional circles. Return all materials such as situational manuals at the end of the exercises, and discuss it within your professional circle. And then when the exercise is done, as I indicated, it's very important that you review the exercises and conduct an improvement planning meeting, and then eventually develop an improvement plan. So in Maine, some of the strengths that we've revealed: response collaboration between the water utilities and local emergency responders was excellent. Many of the rural water systems that we deal with are very well connected with, say, the fire department and police department, and many of them actually have 2 jobs. One is to serve on that public safety entity, as well as be a water utility professional. Utilities' ability to recognize the need to activate their emergency response plan and issue, like drinking water orders, boil water orders, excellent. They understand that. That is an instrumental part of their emergency response plans. And then their ability to ask for mutual aid from neighboring utilities and utilizing the warn, knowing when to ask for help. Some gaps that have been revealed is prompt notification of source water contaminant threats. Utilities being notified that when an incident happens, there's always room for improvement, indicating what was exactly spilt or what is the incident, and getting situational updates. Utilities maintaining situational awareness, which is tied to that. So their lack of ability to integrate with incident command or unified command. So we see that they don't tend to look to be a part of that when they actually are an instrumental part of that emergency. Lack of a designated public information officer, a PIO for the utility and also the community. Some say that yes, someone will serve that role, but they aren't really prepared for that. And the lack of a plan to deal with social media and news media. Other gaps, communities prepared for long-term loss of potable water and fire protection. And this would be the towns and city officials and critical customers, and a formal and or tested water distribution plan like for bulk or bottled water. Lack of reliable approved backup water supplies like interconnects and backup sources. Some of the gaps revealed. So, and a few others, backup emergency communications. In Maine, many of the water utilities have gone to use cellular phones. Well, when there's an emergency, sometimes cellular phone don't work very well. So it would be good that they have two-way radios. The ability to issue and enforce water conservation orders. We're very fortunate in Maine to have a lot of water, but if there's an incident, they're not used to being able to issue water conservation orders and let alone enforce them. So a formal plan to address and track incident-related expenses. Another thing that utilities could delegate to another person that be aware of all the incident-related expense tracking. So the benefits of exercise offers opportunity to examine and strengthen response capacities, offers an opportunity to educate responders and stakeholders of water utility critical assets, and also, their wellhead protection areas. Verify and identify methods to prevent, prepare for, and respond to and recover from emergencies is a huge benefit. So prevention is emphasized in all our exercises. Say, hey, we just had this scenario, how can we prevent it? And a lot of time is spent on that. So why buy all this emergency response gear if you can actually prevent it? Then that you're way ahead of the game. A successful exercise involves getting people to the table. We all have busy lives, but I consider myself a car salesman. And I'm a bulldog when it comes to getting people there. And I think that's an important piece. And you get people there, you convince them of the importance of being a part of the exercise. When they get there, they're very pleased to be a part, and they gain an understanding of why they're there. So that's from emergency responders to critical customers to surrounding utilities. You need to sell the importance of them being a part of this exercise. We just did a emergency exercise in a small rural town of Waterboro, and this utility actually only provides water to a very small population, 383 people, but we are very successful at getting over 50 people to attend. And this was rather unheard of for the town to get a gathering that large, but it was an extremely beneficial exercise to test the emergency response of this small little rural system. So I would like to thank you for your attention, and I'm going to turn it back over to Bill.
Great, thanks, Tom. Thank you for the presentation, and looks like I have control again. So let's see. We have a second polling question for you. If you could just let us know what type of agency you represent we're interested to see if you're a utility or a government agency or part of the water sector in some way. We'll leave that up for 5 to 10 seconds so you can fill in your answer. Okay, Sarah, if you could close the polling question, please. Thank you, everyone who responded. You should be able to see the results on your screen now. And up next, we have Gary and Stacy, who will be talking about their experiences with Philadelphia.
Okay, thank you, Bill. And Tom did a really excellent job giving you a lot of material in a short amount of time. And so I'm going to give you a quick perspective from a water utility, though be it a large water utility, and then turn it over to Stacy and let him explain to you how we do the planning for exercises. Philadelphia got involved about a decade ago through the US EPA Water Security Initiative in a grant for the Contamination there you go, warning system demonstration pilot project. Okay. There we go. Thank you.
I'm not sure what's happening. It's not letting the presentation stay live.
And we've brought on CH2M Hill or Jacobs to help us with project management and especially to manage the exercises. As Tom explained, there's a lot of detail that goes into running these exercises. The important thing to realize up front is that doing the exercise is not necessarily the most important thing. The upfront aspects to it are very important. Updating documents, procedures, roles and responsibilities, and contact lists. Training and retraining employees before the exercise. The exercise isn't a test. It's a practice. So you want to make sure everybody knows what they should be doing before they do it. Then you do the exercise, and then after the exercise, the after action report and improvement plan helps you identify the gaps. And then you have to follow through on what's been identified. Through all this, we've been conducting about 1 to 2 exercises every year. And as Tom said, it's a great place to invite stakeholders to build relationships and strengthen those relationships. And, every year we don't run through every component in an SRS. One year we may do online water quality monitoring, another we may bring in public health, sampling and analysis, enhanced security, consumer complaints, and then the biggie, the consequence management of an event is usually much bigger to plan and to exercise. So we rotate through those. Being the laboratory director, where I have sampling crews and field crews and the response personnel and laboratory staff, one of my biggest concerns in the utility is these frontline employees who might be the first on a scene when something unknown is happening, and they may be most at risk than anybody else who follows. So one of the purposes of doing exercises is to prepare them for that unknown response up front. Building the site characterization team, gathering supplies and making plans before taking action. Oftentimes we just jump right into action before we think and talk about what we're going to do. All the field work, the safety and rapid screening and the testing and sampling that has to go on, the sample transport, which can be very important, site security, and of course communications. And in going through this exercise, we've listed all the staff to respond to a serious incident correctly and to have all bases covered. We listed all the people that should be involved uh, with field sampling and laboratory analysis and communications, and we came up with quite a list. In practical terms, most of our staff would be involved in an incident if something serious were to be happen. So hopefully, when something does happen, we'll be full staffed on that day we need to respond. And then going through the decision tree, we've learned, for example, that communication isn't always as complete and thorough as it needs to be. Not everybody's getting the word as to where we are in time with response. We go from determining that contamination is possible to contamination is confirmed, and sometimes we either stop at possible and don't want to move forward, or we jump right away to confirmed without going through the steps and taking all the appropriate actions in communication and going through the step of making a credible determination. And in exercises, sometimes you find you hold or you jump through it too quickly because everyone knows it's an exercise, but trying to keep it real and to keep that on target is important to identify gaps. Bottom line is, we know, and as well as all of you know, that if you have a good plan that sits and collects dust on the shelf, it's not going to be ready when you need it. The people that need to follow the plan are not going to remember it when it needs to kick into action. So by doing these exercises, we're retraining new people and retraining those who may have forgotten and reminding ourselves of what needs to happen, should an incident happen. So I'll pass it over to Stacy to give you the details.
Thanks, Gary. Bill, it's taken a few seconds. Here we go. I'd like to start off by not only discussing our involvement with the Philadelphia Water Department back in the EPA Water Securities Initiative days, but to move this more outward towards a message for the entire water utility community in the United States. The importance of exercise planning. One thing that comes out of most exercises that we plan and conduct here at Jacobs is that it improves external response partner relationship. Back in the day, the Philadelphia Water Department was looked at as a subject matter expert when external emergency response partners showed up on scene for an incident involving the utility. Through exercises and training, they became part of the unified command process. So that was a growing lesson that we worked on for the better part of 3 years. And it serves to educate the emergency preparedness planning and improve understanding of existing emergency plans. If they sit on a shelf, like Gary said, it's likely that when needed, no one's going to know what's in them. So the planning team prepares the exercise. The planning team in the consultant world is generally a mix of 1 or 2 consultants and members of the water utility. We always encourage the water utility planning team members not to participate in the exercise. And what the outcomes of these things are is it improves public confidence in the utility. And that's very important. If the public feels that their utility is well managed and well run, then that's what it is. And it improves the player participant knowledge of the National Incident Management System, Incident Command System, which in your emergency response plan should be a component within that plan. How to plan an exercise. We follow the Homeland Security Exercise and Evaluation Program as Tom discussed earlier. we follow the building block approach to planning and conducting an exercise. And in short, we would not encourage the people that we plan exercises for, or agencies, to go from a tabletop exercise and jump right up to a full-scale exercise. That kind of leap could be a recipe for failure. So if you follow the building block approach as outlined here, you'll be in great shape. Exercise objectives. We always encourage evaluated exercises here at Jacobs for our clients, in that they get, we follow the Homeland Security exercise and evaluation program, and you follow the exercise objectives that are listed in the target capabilities list within HCEP, and then you end up at the end of the exercise with an after action report and improvement plan. So again, exercises are different. Number 4 here shows that drills may have a single focus and objective, such as on-site incident management or communications. And when we develop the exercise documents for a drill, okay, wait. Okay. All right, example steps to an exercise. For example, you have discussion-based exercises and operational exercises in the HCEP building block continuum. So starting off with a discussion-based exercise, you would develop documents including a situation manual and other items for that exercise. You develop an exercise plan for the operational exercises, which are drills, functional, and full-scale exercises. And then for operational exercises, there's quite a few more documents you'd have to develop for the operational side of exercising. And it kind of lists them out here. I don't need to read them, but the one thing that's very important is a player participant media briefing prior to the exercise, so that the player participants understand the rules of conduct for the exercise. And then we go through a series of planning team meetings, and we have a final planning conference prior to exercise conduct. Planning team meetings for operational exercises. You have several of them, and they can grow based on the number of agencies that are playing in the exercise and the length of the exercise. So you have initial planning team meetings, as Tom discussed earlier. You have initial planning conferences to lay the foundation for the exercise development. The first thing that's important when planning an exercise is to identify what your exercise objectives are. Generally, they're no less than 3 and no more than 5. So if you can go 3 to 4 to 5 objectives for the exercise, with the exception of a drill, you can accomplish quite a bit through the exercise conduct. So then you move on to your midterm planning. After the exercise is completed, that after action report is generally reviewed through what's called an after action conference, which is done with the exercise planning team. After it's reviewed, it's finalized, and the exercise is over. Planning team meetings, again, conference, and again, as I stated earlier, the after action conference. Pre-exercise briefings. This is an important element to an exercise. It explains to the player participants that this is a no-fault exercise environment. It serves to introduce the exercise staff, such as a facilitator for a tabletop exercise or exercise director for an operational exercise, and the controllers and evaluators, and it identifies their roles so that the player participants understand the ground rules for the exercise. We do have safety moments, and we explain how in a real life emergency or any other type of emergency, how we stop play. We give an overview of the exercise documents, and then the player participant locations during the exercise. And then at the end of the exercise, we have what's called a hot wash, or a player participant debrief. So we explain what that will involve prior to exercise start. Prior training before conducting an exercise, not only do the value of it is that it gives the player participants important information that they need to know prior to starting the exercise. The other thing that we do is we train the exercise controllers and exercise evaluators if it's an operational exercise, and we give exercise facilitator training prior to the start of a discussion-based exercise, such as a tabletop exercise. Player participants in the exercise hot wash. This is an opportunity for the exercise planning team to hear from the player participants as to what went well, the structure of the exercise, the length of it, anything that they're willing to discuss that can make the next exercise better than the one that we just conducted. So, and again, I put a footnote down here on the bottom that the exercise hot wash generally is for the player participants only. There are facilitator debriefs and controller and evaluator and observer debriefs that are done separately from the player participant hot wash. The after action report and improvement plan. This brings the exercise to conclusion and the after action conference. It summarizes the exercise. It provides a recap. But most importantly, like Tom brought up earlier, it provides an improvement plan that also allows for staff assignments to follow up on to make sure that the improvement plan is carried forward. And again, like I indicated earlier, the after action conference, where the planning team gets together to review and finalize the after action report and improvement plan. I want to say one quick thing before I stop talking. As we move forward, water utilities move forward with the America's Water Infrastructure Act that's in play right now, and the deadlines. We certainly would encourage all water utilities to consider, after certification letters have been submitted, the final being their emergency response plan, that you do consider exercising that emergency response plan so that you can make the necessary adjustments to it based on the after action report from that exercise. So I hope we stayed on target, and thank you.
Thank you, Gary and Stacy. We are going to open up a final polling question. Sarah, if you could put that up, just to gauge how many in the audience have been involved in an exercise and what the role might have been. We'll leave it up for another 5 seconds. All right, Sarah, if you could close it. Thank you, everyone who responded. And today, I'm just going to finish up before we jump into Q&A, if my PowerPoint will stay live. I just wanted to go through really quickly the resources that the Water Security Division has for conducting training and exercises. We have a recently published guidance document on responding to drinking water contamination that has a whole section on developing a training and exercise program for contamination, incorporating that into your larger training program. You can find it. The web links for all of these resources are provided on the screen. The division also has a water resilience training website that has webinar opportunities. There's training videos on ICS, on NIMS. There's other training available for all hazards, not just water contamination. And there's various training tools available from the website. Two of the big ones I'd like to highlight are the Exercise Development Toolbox, which is a product of the Surveillance and Response team. It focuses on exercising the different areas of the surveillance and response system for drinking water contamination. It allows for building, it's more or less like a database of different exercises that you can build, discussion-based and operations-based exercises. That it'll save it in the program, and you can go back over time and view them, pull the information out. It helps to build all of the documents that Tom, Gary, and Stacy discussed that need to be created while you're conducting an exercise. And it takes you through the different steps for doing each of those. And then the other tool is a tabletop exercise tool for drinking water and wastewater utilities. This is focused strictly on tabletop exercises, but it covers all hazards, not just contamination, but earthquakes, hurricanes, source water contamination. And it has some nice scenarios that are pre-programmed into it. A lot of the questions we get are like, well, how do you go about building the scenario? Like, what's a scenario? This gives you an example of what a scenario might look like. And then you can go through and fill in what's important to your utility. You don't want to just go with what's here because whatever the scenario is in this tool might not be applicable to your utility. And again, those are all the links to all of those tools and resources are available on that first slide. For more information on the surveillance and response system, you can visit our website, epa.gov/water quality surveillance. It's got the training and exercise information as well as the information on the surveillance and response components of an SRS. So I want to thank everyone for participating. Thank Tom, Gary, and Stacy for presenting, and Darcy and Sarah for running the stuff behind the scenes. And this is the final webinar in our webinar series for the SRS program. You can view the previous webinars. The recordings have been posted to the website. The link is available on the screen there. And if you have any questions about what you saw today, feel free to contact any of us that presented. Contact information is on the screen. So with that, I would think we can head to the Q&A. If you have a question, please type it into the chat, and Darcy will read it back to us and we can answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. We have a few questions so far. The first one I'm going to direct to you. The question is there any requirement from EPA for local water utilities to conduct exercises?
There is not that I'm aware of. It's a voluntary thing. We do encourage it heavily, but it is not required. There's no reporting requirement on it, as far as I'm aware.
Okay, and the next question may be to you as well, Bill, and possibly for the other presenters. The question is, what has been studied as the weakest section in emergency planning?
Oh, I don't know if there's any one area that's the weakest. Anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Repeat the question.
What has been studied as the weakest section in emergency planning?
I don't think that we've ever identified an area that's the weakest section of emergency planning because it's a team effort. Communication was touched on earlier in our presentation, and of course, when communication fails, everything else fails right with it. So we've tried on most of our exercises to involve an exercise objective of communications to test that capability.
This is
Thank you,
Gary.
Stacy.
I would add that what I've kind of heard over the years is the weakest is working with people who you've never worked with before. If you haven't worked with, spoken with, developed some type of relationship and trust with your fellow responders and the people you need to rely on and communicate with, then that can really hold things up. It can confuse things. I think in general in water utility response and in general in response overall, that may be the weakest.
Yeah, I'll echo that. In Maine, in the exercises that we've conducted, a huge benefit is bringing the awareness factor of water systems, where they're located and their vulnerabilities to the first responders. And the exercises actually emphasize that, and it's very rewarding when they say, "Oh, that's what your water system's about. These are your critical customers," and integrating too with incident command. That's something we see all the time. Whereas utilities say, "Well, I understand what your incident command is," but they're not used to working with emergency responders in that environment. So being part of that, designating somebody to be the conduit of communications from incident command and to incident command is a weak point that needs practice.
All right, the next question is, are there any links or references to existing emergency response plans to use for reference? And maybe Bill, maybe this is appropriate for you.
On the resilience, let me go back to we don't have example plans, but we do have some outlines and some resources to help you develop one. On the EPA.gov water resilience website, there are some emergency response plan links for a small system link and a larger system outline. That's actually an area that's being updated as we speak. I don't have a timeline for when it will be updated, but it's something that's being worked on within the division. The guidance for responding to drinking water contamination, there at that link, there is a template for a drinking water contamination specific annex to your response plan. The template is there with example figures and decision trees and such. You can go and download that today. It's already posted.
Thank you, Bill. The next question is, what equipment do you recommend that staff use during initial site assessment and sampling to a drinking water alarm? Do samplers wear certain personal protective equipment?
So this is Gary. I'll just start. There have been published resources laying out some of this. I would say what we have is we have a response closet, if you want to call it, and we have supplies ready to go. So whether it's vests and gloves and eye protection, DI water to rinse yourself with. So we have all that ready to go, and we check it regularly to make sure it's ready to go. Because who knows who the responder is going to be, and you want to provide them with what they need to just grab and go out into the field and make sure they bring everything with them.
Thank you, Gary. And Bill, I think that wraps up the questions. So do you want to close the webinar?
Yeah, we're at the top of the hour as well. So thank you everyone for listening. And if you're interested, this webinar, the recording for this webinar will be posted to the link that I showed down here, the monthly webinar series link here. It'll probably be available in 3 to 4 weeks. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.